Turn to 596. 596. I heard an old story, how the Savior came from glory, how he gave his life on Calvary to save a wretch like me. I heard about his groaning, for his precious blood atoned me. Then I repented of my sins and won the victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought me with his redeeming blood. He loved me ere I knew him, and all my love is to him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. I heard about his healing, of his saving power revealing, how he made the lame to walk again, and caused the blind to see. And then I cried, dear Jesus, come and heal my broken spirit. I then obeyed his blessed command and gained the victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought me with his redeeming blood. He loved me ere I knew him, and all love is to him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. I heard about a mansion he has built for me in glory, and I heard about a street of gold beyond the crystal sea, about the angels singing and the old redemption story. And some sweet day I'll sing up there the song of victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought me with his redeeming blood. He loved me ere I knew him, and all my love is to him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. Joe, you want to open prayer?
Heavenly Father, thank you again for another Lord's Day, allowing us to assemble and hear more of your praises and sing your glory and do the things we need to show our love for you. Father, thank you for the church in Campbell. Thank you for the church worldwide. And Father, please be with us. Thank you for the love that you show us each day, the mercy and the glory and the hope that we have with you in heaven forever. Please forgive us of our sins. We ask this in Jesus' name.
Amen. 638. 638. When the trumpet of the Lord shall sound, and time shall be no more, and the morning breaks eternal, bright and fair. When the saved of earth shall gather over on the other shore, and the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, when the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. On that bright and cloudless morning, when the dead in Christ shall rise, and the glory of His resurrection share, when His chosen ones shall gather to their home beyond the skies, and the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, when the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. Let us labor for the Master from the dawn till setting sun. Let us talk of all His wondrous love and care. Then when all of life is over and our work on earth is done, and the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, when the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there.
Time to do the last famous preacher in here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's great that we can be back. I know it's kind of dreary and rainy outside, and I heard that some places around us are supposed to be getting a little bit of winter weather. It's still good we can all be out and come to Bible class. I'm excited about it. You know, singing that last song, when the roll call is called up yonder, I'll be there, that is exciting to me. I don't know how I could possibly sing that song without a smile on my face. When the roll's called up yonder, when God's taking roll of all the people that's going to be in heaven, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be with it. I'm going to be singing praises to God. I'm going to be excited and happy. So that's a good way to start the Bible class. I appreciate Marty always leading the singing, especially that song this morning. Helped get us motivated a little bit. This morning, we're going to talk a little bit about Jacob and Esau. We're going to talk about Jacob wrestling with God. We're going to talk about the end, basically, of Jacob's big part of the picture in the book of Genesis. His part of the story is coming to a close, and his son Joseph is going to kind of take over on the scene. But for now, we're still with Jacob. We're almost done with Genesis. I've mentioned this in the last couple of Sunday morning classes, but we've spent quite a lot of time here, and we've covered quite a lot of different aspects of Genesis, and we've been trying to get the big picture. We've been trying to get the basic understanding of what happened so that we have a good foundation to base the rest of our Bible knowledge off of. We're in Genesis chapter 32. Genesis chapter 32. This is right after Laban has chased him down, when he's left Laban being his father-in-law and his uncle in a sort of way as well. After Laban has chased him down and found him and got to bless his grandkids. Remember, he was warned by God, don't he say anything to him good or bad? And after they have set up these stones saying, I won't pass over it this way to you, and you won't pass over it this way to me. Basically, you go your way and I'll go mine, and we won't have to deal with each other anymore. They weren't getting along. Laban had changed his ways, as Jacob put it, 10 times. And it deceived him quite a bit with getting his wife. Jacob got Leah and Rachel, and he only wanted Rachel. The first time he got Leah, thinking he was getting Rachel. And then he figured out he had to work another 7 years for the bride for his wife that he originally intended. So we see a lot of deception that went on there, and that ship has sailed. That part is over and past him now. Now he has to reconcile with Esau. They have that old saying, out of the frying pan into the fire. Well, that's kind of what's happened here. He's gotten away from Laban and kind of ended that conflict. And now there's another conflict. His brother Esau, the man that he wronged, stole his birthright, stole his blessing, lied, deceived his sick and dying father so that he could get that blessing. Esau wasn't very happy with him. You may remember why Jacob left in the first place. His mother sent him away so that he wouldn't be killed by Esau, because Esau had it in his mind, I'll just wait till after my father dies and the time of mourning for him is over, and then I'll get my revenge. Then I'll kill Jacob. So that's why Jacob went away. That for the purpose of finding a wife. So now he's coming back and he's having to deal with Esau again. Read with me beginning in verse 1. Genesis chapter 32. Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, This is God's camp. So he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, instructing them, Thus you shall say to my lord Esau, Thus says your servant Jacob, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, male servants and female servants. I have sent to tell my lord, nor that I might find favor in your sight. And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, We came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you, and there are 400 men with him. And then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. He divided the people who were with him and their flocks and herds and camels into 2 camps, thinking, If Esau comes to the one camp and attacks it, then the camp that is left will escape. And Jacob said, O God, my father Abraham, of my father Abraham, and of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, Return to your country and go to your kindred, that it may do you good. I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become 2 camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau. For I fear him, that he may come and attack me, and the mothers with the children. But you said, I will surely do you good, and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. So he stayed there that night, and from what he had with him, he took a present for his brother Esau, 200 female goats, and 20 male goats, 200 ewes, and 20 rams, 30 milking camels and their calves, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. Then he handed over to his servants, every drove by itself, and said to his servants, Pass on ahead of me, and put his face between drove and drove. He instructed the first, When Esau my brother meets you and asks you, To whom do you belong? Where are you going? And whose are these ahead of you? Then you shall say, They belong to your servant Jacob. They are a present sent to my lord Esau. And moreover, he is behind us. He likewise instructed the second and third, and all who follow the droves. You shall say the same thing to Esau when you find him. And you shall say, Moreover, your servant Jacob is behind us. For he thought, I may appease him with the present that goes ahead of me, and afterwards I shall see his face. Perhaps he will accept me. So the present passed on ahead of him, and he himself stayed the night in the camp. So I know we covered quite a lot of ground there, but that gives us a little bit more to talk about. First, and kind of an interesting aspect of this, when Jacob is first passing over the river and going to his brother Laban back chapters before, he had a dream, didn't he? About a ladder with angels ascending and descending from heaven to earth. Now, as he's coming back, what does he see? The angels of God met. That's interesting. Jacob has a lot of connection with God here. He seems to have a relationship, at least with seeing things, that we don't have recorded that the other patriarchs saw. Perhaps it's because more things are coming close to God creating His nation. Perhaps it has something to do with the fact that His name's going to be changed to Israel, and He's going to be physically the father of the many tribes of Israel. Perhaps. What else happens in this part of the chapter? Well, he got afraid. He sent some people to go on ahead of him and speak to Esau, because he was scared because he'd wronged him. And when they came back, what did they say? They said Esau was smiling and happy, and he said, I can't wait till he gets here. I'm going to prepare a meal for him. What was their report? He says he's coming out to meet you, and he's got a bunch of men with him. What does that say to Jacob? So he's coming out to meet me with an army. Oh, wow. That doesn't sound too good, does it? Makes him feel like that he's coming out to kill him, like he originally had said. So then he decides to do something else. Well, first he talks to God. God had told him to go back to the land. He said, you said, go back and I'll do good to you. I'll bless you. So he's trusting in God here, but he's kind of scared. Well, that's an interesting idea. Can you trust in God and still be scared? Can there be a balance there?
Can if you have a guilty conscience.
You
can if you have a guilty conscience.
You can be scared if you have a guilty conscience, but is there also a way you can be scared but still trust in God and act on God? I don't mean be scared in the form of scared and shrink away.
I don't think nothing's wrong being scared as long as you still do the right thing.
You can do the right thing in fear. It's okay to be scared, but there's a difference in being scared and acting out of fear. What commonly motivates us to act out of fear is when we have a guilty conscience. When we have something that's bothering us and we're kind of afraid to come before God with a pure heart and open mind. There's two sides to this.
What David said. Fear no evil.
Yeah, you have the two sides of fear. I will fear no evil because God's with me. Then you have the other side of fear. Recognition.
Well, I think Esau was still afraid of Jacob. He knew he was coming. And he had fear of him too.
Jacob did fear Esau because Esau was coming out with an army. And another interesting aspect here. How did Jacob refer to Esau? Did he say, hello Esau, my servant, as our father said you would be, dwelling in my tents, being my servant? Or did he say, your servant Jacob? Who did he put higher up? Jacob put himself lower on the totem pole than he put Esau. But what was the blessing that he got? That he would be higher up than Esau would. He seems to be bowing down before Esau, saying, okay, you're the boss, you're the man. He's trying to make amends. He splits his whole party, his whole camp that's with him, into two camps, assuming that if one gets attacked, the other one will have a chance to escape. He even sends out waves of gifts. Doesn't send it all at once. He sends some gifts, so Esau see these gifts and go, wow, look what he gave me. And then go a little further, wow, look, he gave me some more.
Well, he was trying to preserve his seed too, so to speak, because God had made that promise.
He was looking after not only himself, but future generations. What was he worried about? The mothers and the children? He was scared that Esau would come out and completely wipe out his family. After all, what kind of a person was Jacob? Think back to earlier on in the story of Jacob and Esau. Esau was a man of the field. He was a great hunter. What was Jacob? He said he was a man that dwelt in tents. He was more of an indoors guy. He wasn't this red, rugged, hairy man of the field. He was more of a softer man, I would say.
Well, he was a cook.
He was a cook. He at least knew how to make some good stew.
Yeah.
So he's looking at this situation. Esau, big brother Esau, or however much bigger in many different ways it is, big brother Esau's mad at me. He's mad at the field. He's a hunter. Pretty good with a bow and arrow. So I've made him mad, now he's come after me with a huge army. Let's split the camps. Maybe one of them can escape. Let's send gifts and waves. And perhaps by the time I get to him, I'll have appeased his anger. And let's call him master and make myself his servant. Perhaps that'll make him feel better. So he's got all this expectation. So he sends all these out, and then he spends the night there. That brings us to verse 22. The same night he arose and took his two wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had. And Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket. And Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day is broken." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then he said, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men, and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered." The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. Therefore to this day the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip and the sinew of the thigh. So what's going on here? He's wrestling with this man who later becomes to be identified as God. Now, what did we just say about Jacob? He was the kind of guy that dwells in tents, right? Kind of soft man. He's wrestling with God and prevailing over him. This is the same individual he's wrestling with here that touches his hip and it goes out of socket. And Jacob's wrestling with that guy? So there seems to be a little bit more to Jacob than we first thought. What's going on here? Well, it seems to be an illustration. Because what was the blessing that Jacob got? He wrestled with man and with God. Well, he had. Look what had happened with him and Esau. Look what happened with him and Laban. He's been wrestling with people his whole life. A lot of it was his causing. But he's been a man of drama. That's the way I put it.
Jacob still prevailed and stayed within the laws of God.
Mm-hmm.
The rules of God.
And what's interesting also here is during this wrestling, while this wrestling is going on, what does he ask for? The individual he's wrestling with, identified as God, says, "Bless me." Or he says, "Let me go." And then Jacob says, what? "Bless me." He asks for a blessing. This is interesting to me because it speaks a lot about Jacob's life. Because this is a condensed view of what Jacob's life was all about. It was about wrestlings. He constantly had drama going on. Perhaps it was this deceptive nature of which he dwelt for a lot of life. That's a very good possibility. Perhaps it's just his allotment in life. Things just seem to happen to him. But even after this, not only do you have Jacob and Esau, not only do you have Jacob and Laban, what about his sons? His sons fight together. He favors Joseph over the other. They throw Joseph in a pit, dip his coat in blood, send it back to his father, make him think he's dead, sell his brother into slavery. And then his son Joseph goes into Egypt, becomes a pharaoh. There's a whole famine in the land, and his sons go to Egypt to get grain. And who do they meet but Joseph? Joseph keeps one of the sons and sends the other back. Causes the father more distress. This is Jacob. Jacob's the father. Then Jacob has to send his only other son by his favored wife to get the one back. A lot of drama going on here. Then he picks up and moves to Egypt. There's a lot of wrestling going on with men. So this seems to be an illustration about that. After all, if the individual Jacob's wrestling with can touch his hip socket and dislocate it, there's not really much of a way to win that fight. And how did Jacob put it after the fight? Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. He didn't say, all right, I won the wrestling match. He said, God let me live. Thank goodness God let me live. So the idea behind that seems to be some sort of illustration. Now, some people will say here that he wrestled with an angel, and that angel being an agent of God is the way it's taken here. Some people say that it was God in the flesh. There are appearances before Christ came in the flesh where there is someone usually referred to as the angel of the Lord that is bowed down in worship. And the reason that is interesting is because angels don't receive worship. Nobody receives worship except for God. So it seems to be an appearance of Christ before he came in flesh, before he was born of Mary. That's a very good possibility. You'll also find people who connect this same kind of thing with the commander of the army of the Lord that Joseph met when he first entered the land of Canaan, and he was about to conquer Jericho, and he bowed down before him and worshipped him. In the book of Revelation, when John bows down before the angel and starts to worship him, the angel said, don't worship me, I'm just a servant like you. Angels didn't receive worship. So that's worthy of note. Some things like that. We'll have people specifically that are angels that are called God. Another important thing. When we say angel, what do we think of? A woman in a robe with wings and a halo, possibly a harp. That's the idea that we usually get from the word angel. Well, a couple of interesting things. You never have a feminine use of the word angel anywhere in the Bible. There's no indication anywhere of a female angel. You don't become an angel after you die. Angels are a created race of servants. Angel in the Greek literally is messenger. In fact, that's what the word literally means.
I think it's been a form of mankind because God says we have to be careful. We may be entertaining angels unaware.
They do sometimes take the form of man. For example, the men that came to Sodom and Gomorrah, the people that visited Abraham, they were in the form of man. Yet we also see them in the form of a burning bush, speaking to Moses. We see them in the form of chariots and horses of fire surrounding Elisha. We see them in the form of a chariot man in a chariot, separating Elisha and Elijah before Elijah is taken up into heaven.
Is this an angel wrestling Jacob?
My personal belief is, since he said he was wrestling with God, is that it's probably one of those appearances of Jesus before he came in flesh. That's my own personal
He was a
opinion
spirit
of that.
then, though, wasn't he?
Yes, but there is
He wrestled spirit.
the same idea comes back with.
I know everybody's wanting to ask these questions, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah. There are occasions where spiritual beings are able to be touched. For example, what about the angels? An angel is a spiritual being. Incorporeal is a word. They're not physical. They're spiritual. Yet, angels appear in the Old Testament all the time. Fighting, killing, walking, being touched. This kind of stuff happens. So there seems to be some way that something like that can happen. It's a difficult part of this to explain, but anytime I see God in the flesh, I think Jesus. Anytime I see someone appearing before someone else, seeing God, how do we see God? We do it through the Word, we do it through Jesus. Anytime that we're given an insight into seeing God in any physical way or knowing His mind, it's through Jesus or through the Spirit. So that is my first indication, first snap answer. How do you touch a spirit? I'm not a spirit, so I can't really tell you, but they've been touched. And there's physical things that happen. For example, whenever Daniel's praying and he gets a vision from an angel and he sees the Son of Man and he kind of falls asleep or passes out or whatever way you want to take that, and he's touched on the side by an angel to wake him up, to get him to stand up. How does an angel touch him? I don't know.
Mentally.
Huh?
Mentally, what I would say. You know, it felt like he touched it. Did he actually touch it?
Well, it says he reached out with his hand and touched his side. And maybe it is a mental thing there,
But
but...
who knows that, the angel?
Well, it's recorded by Daniel. And it's given as a third party, third person. It's like if someone's looking on from above. And then Daniel did this, and the angel reached down and touched his side.
But Daniel told that story, right?
Yeah, Daniel was
Such and such.
Daniel was the one penning the book, but it was an inspired writing, so it's the true account from God, but it's told from a third person's perspective. Daniel didn't say, and I fell to the ground, you know, like that. It's terms of, if I remember correctly, let me just look it up and make sure, because I don't want to tell you something and it not be exactly right. But I'm almost 100% certain it was told from a third person perspective. Let's just get there. Anytime you're dealing with a spiritual being, you're dealing with something that is outside of our realm of understanding. We're dealing with something that is outside of our realm of comprehension. All we can know is what specifically we have been told by God. Chapter 10, verse 18. In this occasion where it happens, it's the first person. Again, one having the appearance of a man touched and strengthened. It's not the exact place I was looking for. It happens again in Revelation with John. This is a little bit of a rabbit, but it's a good one to chase from time to time because it's important to our discussion. With this, we have to try to understand how Jacob could have wrestled with God and wrestled with an angel and have been touched. There has to be a way for all those to work. We have numerous accounts of angels taking physical appearance. How do you get touched by wind?
It could be a dream or just a realistic reality itself. And I can testify that from personal experience. Because I had it right in my eye this morning.
Dreams can very much so seem like a reality. And you do have different occasions where Daniel will go into one of his night visions, and that is a form of a vision, dream, however you want to refer to that. The reason I don't take specifically that Jacob wrestling with angels is a dream is because it doesn't picture it as one. It just pictures it as a wrestling. There are different times where we have Joseph having a dream. And he says, this is what happened. All your straw bundles bow down to me. All your bundles of barley bow down to me. And the sun and the moon, or the sun and the moon and all the stars were bowing down to me. And those are obviously dreams. And he tells us that they're dreams. But here he just mentions that after he sent everyone else over, he started wrestling with the guy. So that is a possibility, but it doesn't seem so to me because of the fact that he doesn't really say anywhere there that it was specifically a dream. With the angels, though, you do see them taking on physical forms while being spiritual beings.
If you cannot distinguish a dream from reality, you wouldn't expect him to say it.
If the individual couldn't distinguish whether it was a dream or reality, you wouldn't expect him to, that's right. The reason I would expect it to be recorded in Genesis would be that I would expect God to have that included. If God was offering behind the scenes and giving the instructions and carrying along Moses, since specifically Jacob wasn't writing this down, it was being written down later by Moses, it would first and foremost come to me is that Moses isn't the one saying, well, it felt like a dream to me, perhaps it's reality, I don't know. But he's getting all this information from history being passed down and from God. So he would get what I would think would be the true form account. We know that angels can touch people. It happens throughout the Bible. We know they take on physical forms. Where do they get the bodies? Is there some guy they go and possess for a little bit and they take it back? It doesn't seem like. Where do they get their bodies? Is it just something that they can all take on that form? I mentioned a second ago, how are you touched by wind?
One of the reasons we have to be changed into something that man can perceive is because the only way we have of receiving something is through our five senses. That angel's got, or whatever God gives us, it's got to have some form that we can absorb through those five senses that we have. Like vision and smell and taste and whatever.
With Balaam and his donkey. You have them walking down the road, and him going down the road on his donkey. The donkey sees the angel, but Balaam doesn't. And so the donkey will go to the left, go to the right, sit down, stop. And Balaam's hitting it over the head over and over again with a staff. He doesn't understand what's going on. And finally, God opens up Balaam's eyes to see the angel. Well, before he couldn't see him, now he can. So where does that fit in? Where are they? They obviously can be unseen when they want to be unseen, and they can obviously be seen when they want to be seen. They obviously exist. There are myriads of them. They're all around.
But he saw the demeanor of the donkey change.
Mm-hmm.
So he knew something was going on.
He assumed his donkey was doing something wrong. And the donkey turned around to him and said, "Haven't I always served you well? Why do you keep hitting me?" And remarkably, he didn't freak out. He just continued on having a conversation with the donkey. Yeah.
I'd freak out.
I think I'd be running off.
The only reason I brought that up was Jacob fighting God, son of this kind of thing. Either, I don't think Jacob was that tough, I just don't think the Lord was trying to.
That seems to be more of what it was, is that, how did Jacob put it? I escaped with my life. And obviously, if God could have, if the person wrestling with Jacob could touch his hip and dislocate it, well, he could have touched both hips, both arms, and just kind of sat there. I mean, what would Jacob been able to do? He walked away from that limping. Obviously, it was meant to be an illustration, some deeper meaning. You wrestle with God, you wrestle with man. And what's happened to us? Jacob's had his name changed. There's become a new chapter in Jacob's story. No longer is he going to be Jacob. No longer is he going to be the same individual that he was before. Because why? Well, he has wrestled with God and man. Because he's been through so much. Israel. He who strives with God. That's interesting. Here, the nation of Israel, while it had its roots and precursors back with Abraham, you might even say with Noah, it's really beginning here with Jacob. And his son's going to make up the tribes. So this becomes a big deal. This is a very big deal. And it has to do with Israel striving with God. That's the real meaning of its name. And Israel does strive with God. Israel's constantly wrestling with God. Perhaps it's an illustration for those who come later in Israel and see and read and go, Jacob wrestled with God too. We're not the only ones that walking around the wilderness and disobeying Him every second. We're not the only ones that in the land of Canaan at the time of the judges that are constantly going back with other people and wrestling with God because we don't want to do what He says. Solomon may have read this to help. That maybe this makes sense why this people is always wrestling with God and why I've got 700 wives and concubines. And it's indicative of, it's a good explanation of how Israel is. This is an example of all of Israel's time with God rolled into one. Wrestling, striving, constantly fighting. How futile is it to wrestle with God? Like what Marty said, if God was trying, it wouldn't last very long, would it? He just touched his hip and it dislocated. What if it struck him? What would have happened then? Take out the physical. This is the man, this is the God who made man. And you can unmake him like that. This is the God that made everything. You can make it like that.
I think that's kind of like spanking your kid. The way he done it, just let him know.
I thought he was talking about wrestling with God. I don't know if that would be a good example, but I don't know if it was so much a punishment.
Showed him the illustration or something, I don't know.
I don't think it was so much a punishment as showing him an illustration. That here, Jacob's getting his name changed to someone who strives with God after all that he's been through and all that he's done. Both the good and the bad. He's been the kind of person that is a wrestler, a striver. Someone that has a lot of drama going. This can only be understood with a few things. There's things that we know. We know that Jacob wrestled with God here. We also know that he wrestled with a man here. What is the only ever indication we ever have God becoming man. Jesus in the flesh. So that's my ultimate connection. Was Jesus in the flesh before he was born of Mary? I don't know that it has to be a flesh thing. After all, there seems to be a little bit of fudge room there. After all, after Jesus was raised from the dead, his body was resurrected, he could kind of walk through walls and appear places, couldn't he? Change the form of his appearance, so when he's walking down the road with a couple of guys, they didn't recognize him until later. So there seems to be a little bit of leeway with some of that.
They could feel the scars on his hands, so something was there.
Now Jacob limped to meet his brother, right?
Yeah, he limped away from this.
Did he limp for the rest of his life?
I don't know. That's an interesting idea. I've never had my hip dislocated, but I know it's not a fun thing.
I don't think he went to the hospital.
I don't went to the hospital either. I'd imagine with same thing with anything else that's dislocated. If it gets put back into place, it'd be sore and bad and likely to do it again. But hips are pretty big deals. When someone breaks a hip, that's not really a good sign. Especially depending on what your age is. And Jacob's not 18 here. That kind of covers that chapter. Any other questions or comments? We're running low on time. We can pick up a little bit of this next week and talk a little more. It's just kind of interesting stuff. Talking about angels and Jacob wrestling with God and all that's good information. Thank you for your participation and cooperation, and hope it was helpful.